NASA has named the 4 astronauts who will fly the next mission of the Artemis program. Randy Bresnik, Luca Parmitano, Andre Douglas, and Frank Rubio. For most of this program's history, this was supposed to be the big one. The Artemis III crew, the first humans on the moon in over 50 years. But it's not that mission anymore. When this crew flies, currently planned for late 2027, they won't land on the moon. They won't even orbit it. They'll spend about 2 weeks in low Earth orbit, where they'll meet up with both of the commercial landers being built to actually take humans to the lunar surface on a later flight. This is the story of who they are, what they're actually going to do, and how the mission they just got assigned to is what's left after 3 years of slipping schedules, a paused moon station, and an engineering problem that nobody has solved yet. NASA picks Artemis crews from its existing active astronaut corps, the same pool that flies to the International Space Station, sometimes including partner agency astronauts from Canada, Europe, or Japan. To be eligible, you have to be currently active and to have completed basic astronaut training. Beyond that, NASA typically picks for a mix of experience levels, first-time flyers alongside veterans who've already been to space. The 4 announced today fit that pattern. The commander is Randy Bresnik, a 2004 NASA selection who spent the last 8 years inside the program he's now flying. As assistant to the chief of the astronaut office for exploration, he's been managing the crew side of Artemis hardware development since 2018, Orion, SLS, the human landing systems, the lunar spacesuits. Before NASA, he was a U.S. Marine Corps colonel, an FA-18 test pilot, a Top Gun graduate, and a combat veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's flown twice, Space Shuttle mission STS-129 in 2009, and as commander of the International Space Station during Expedition 53 in 2017. 5 spacewalks totaling 32 hours. The pilot is Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, making this the first time an ESA astronaut has been assigned as pilot on a U.S. lunar mission. He's an Italian Air Force colonel and test pilot, selected by ESA in 2009. He's flown twice to the International Space Station, the Volare mission in 2013 and the 201 Day Beyond mission in 2019, during which he became the first Italian and only the 3rd European to command the ISS. He has 6 spacewalks totaling 33 hours, several of them complex repairs to the AMS-02 cosmic ray detector mounted outside the station. 367 days in space across 2 missions. Mission specialist Andre Douglas is the only rookie on the crew. He was selected in NASA's 2021 Artemis Generation class and served as backup crew for Artemis II. So he's been deep in Artemis training while the prime crew flew the actual mission this April. Before NASA, he was a U.S. Coast Guard officer and naval architect, then a senior staff member at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, where he worked on the DART planetary defense mission. He holds a Ph.D. in systems engineering and 3 master's degrees: mechanical engineering, naval architecture, and electrical and computer engineering. Mission specialist Frank Rubio is a 2017 NASA selection and the American record holder for the longest single spaceflight, 371 days aboard the International Space Station from 2022 to 2023. He's a U.S. Army colonel, a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter pilot with more than 1,100 flight hours, and a board-certified family physician and flight surgeon. He conducted 3 spacewalks during his record-setting ISS mission, installing new solar arrays on the station. Here's the mission they've actually been assigned to. Late 2027. Launch from Pad 39B at Kennedy. Same SLS rocket that flew Artemis I and Artemis II. But this time, there is no upper stage. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage that pushed Orion toward the Moon on the first two Artemis flights has been replaced by an inert spacer. For Artemis III, all the rocket has to do is get Orion into low Earth orbit. From there, Orion's European Service Module, the same one that brings the capsule home from the Moon, does the rest. It places the spacecraft into a stable orbit about 460 kilometers up. That orbit is the meeting place. Blue Origin will launch first. Its Mark II lander Pathfinder will reach orbit and loiter for up to 90 days, if needed, until Orion catches up. Once Orion docks, the crew spends about 2 days in joint operations, testing the docking system, crossing the hatch, operating the Blue Origin lander, and performing hardware interface checkouts with the Axim-U spacesuit. Then Orion separates. SpaceX's Starship HLS Pathfinder launches and rendezvous with Orion. The crew docks with Starship and spends about a day in joint operations before separating for the journey home. And when the mission ends, they'll come home through an upgraded heat shield, the redesigned version of the AV coat material that lost pieces during Artemis I and flew Artemis II under a modified re-entry profile to compensate. I covered the full heat shield story in my Artemis II re-entry video, link in the description. That plan got more complicated less than 2 weeks before this announcement. On May 28th, a New Glenn rocket exploded during a static fire test at Cape Canaveral. The launch pad was heavily damaged. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman said publicly that restoring the pad could take until 2028. Blue Origin is finalizing a lease for a second New Glenn site at Vandenberg in California, about 2 years from operational. At today's announcement, NASA said it's stepping in and bringing all of our expertise and capabilities to bear to keep Blue Origin on schedule. SpaceX isn't in the clear either. Starship is currently grounded after its latest test flight, and the lander version of Starship has never flown. So the crew named today is being assigned to a mission where both lander pathfinders are right now in some form of trouble. Here is what they will not do. They will not fly the lander anywhere. The HLS Pathfinders aren't configured for re-entry. They will not transfer fuel between vehicles. That demonstration belongs to a separate, uncrewed test campaign. They will not go to the Moon. If everything works, the mission proves that 2 completely new commercial human landers, built by different companies on dramatically different architectures, can rendezvous, dock, and host a crew. That is the gate for Artemis IV in 2028, which is the mission where humans actually land near the lunar South Pole. So this isn't the landing mission, but it is the rehearsal that decides whether the landing mission can happen on schedule. The reason Artemis III looks like this, and not like the lunar landing it was originally going to be, comes down to a decision NASA made in February of this year. I covered the full story in my Lunar Gateway video, link in the description. Here's the short version, because it matters for what this crew is actually flying. In February 2026, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman announced a major restructuring of the lunar architecture. 2 big things changed. First, the Lunar Gateway, the small moon-orbiting space station that was meant to be the long-term anchor of the Artemis program, was paused. The agency redirected those resources toward a surface-first approach, a permanent base near the lunar South Pole, built up over roughly 7 years. Second, Artemis III itself was redesigned. The previous plan was a single mission that did everything at once. Launch the crew, send them to lunar orbit, rendezvous with a fueled Starship HLS waiting at the Moon, transfer the crew, descend to the surface, come home. Years of safety review had been raising the same concern. That's too many firsts in one flight. So the new plan splits the problem in half. Artemis III handles the rendezvous and crew transfer in Earth orbit, where Orion can return on short notice if something goes wrong. Artemis IV handles the descent and landing at the Moon, with the docking choreography already proven. It's the same logic NASA used in 1969 with Apollo 9. Fly the lunar module crewed for the first time, but do it in low Earth orbit, and don't fly it at the Moon until you know it works. Apollo 9 came 4 months before Apollo 11. Artemis III is planned for 2027, Artemis IV for 2028, though that gap depends on both landers being ready. And NASA confirmed today that Artemis IV itself has been redesigned. Originally, Orion would have flown alone to a high lunar orbit called NRHO, where Starship would meet it. The new plan is different. Orion and Starship dock in low Earth orbit. Then Starship pushes the whole stack toward the Moon into a closer low lunar orbit instead. This improves crew safety and reduces how much fuel Starship has to deliver. Which means Artemis III isn't just a rehearsal for some future mission's docking. It's a rehearsal for Artemis IV's exact procedure. There's one thing the new architecture doesn't fix. For Artemis IV to land at the Moon in 2028, the fueled version of Starship HLS, or Fueled Blue Moon, has to actually be ready. Which means somebody has to have demonstrated cryogenic propellant transfer in orbit by then, at the scale and the cadence the lander requires. As of today, that has never been done. SpaceX is targeting its first inter-vehicle cryogenic propellant transfer demonstration sometime this year, with the full tanker campaign needed for a real Moon mission still beyond that. I went deep on this in my orbital refueling video, link in the description. It's the single hardest engineering problem standing between Artemis and the next boot print on the Moon. The lander pathfinders that this crew will dock with aren't proof that the lander system is ready for the lunar surface. They're proof that the docking system, the proximity operations, and the crew transfer between vehicles work. The lunar mission version of each lander still has to refuel in orbit, fly to the Moon, descend and ascend back to lunar orbit. And it's not just the landers. The lunar spacesuits, Axiom's AXIMU, are running at least 18 months behind schedule per a NASA Inspector General audit released in April. Every one of those steps on its own is unprecedented. Strung together, they're the most complex human spaceflight architecture ever attempted. Artemis III gets this crew one step closer, but it doesn't get the program past any of these problems. They're still ahead. And every one of them is on the critical path for 2028. The next milestone for this crew is when they begin formal mission training, likely within weeks. Artemis II had 3 years to prepare. This crew has less than 2. The next milestone for the program is the first uncrewed cryogenic propellant transfer between 2 starships, targeted for later this year. The names are set. The mission is still being built around them. And now you know what they're actually flying.